The start to another new year to any serious runner often means one thing. It's marathon season again. Whether you've seen any recent race photos from an early season race like the California International Marathon in Sacramento, or caught any footage from the recent Olympic marathon trials held in Orlando earlier this year, or you might just catch yourself checking into the upcoming Boston Marathon on Patriots Day weekend later this month, perhaps some percentage of you watching this video might feel compelled to take on the challenge of competing your first or next 26.2 mile marathon event later on this upcoming training year. And if so, you might find yourself a bit overwhelmed at your options for a training plan to follow. Everything from Hal Higdon's free plans to the Jeff Galloway method, to the Phil Maffetone method, or any hundreds of offerings found in Runner's World magazine articles over the years. There are a lot of canned training plans out there that are built to be applicable to the bulk of novice and intermediate marathon running community. And perhaps one of the better known plans skewing more towards the intermediate end of that spectrum is the Hanson Marathon Method, popularized by Luke Humphrey's book of the same name published in 2012. If you're watching this video right now, chances are pretty good that you're considering the Hanson's plans and are wondering how it stacks up. Is the long run of just 16 miles really enough to carry you through 26.2 miles on race day? Does the lack of any actual recovery weeks during a 4-month training timeline become an issue with injuries as the training goes on? And most importantly, is it actually a solid plan that will actually get you ready to handle the demands of race day? So when doing this research on my own, I didn't really find all that many applicable videos on the topic here on YouTube, but I decided to give their advanced marathon training plan a shot anyway. And now that I've completed the entire 18-week training plan, we're here today to talk about how it went for me and whether or not I would recommend that you use it for your next big event. All right, let's get this started by first explaining what's in the plan. It's not just an 18-week training plan to follow, but it's also a book written by Luke Humphrey. So while the Hanson's plan is presented to you wrapped up into a 150-page book explaining the Hanson brothers' coaching background and the scientific principles that each workout is based upon. Now, I do think that it is helpful to read the book cover to cover and to understand the scientific rationale for each individual workout and its role within the overarching training plan, but that advice is of course optional because the workouts themselves are pretty easy to understand without reading any of the book. Now, I was lucky enough to have a copy of this book that I bought several years ago sitting right here on this bookshelf that I was able to pick up and read before actually getting into the teeth of its training plan. Now, the book offers an advanced plan and a beginner plan, though they do admit that the beginner plan is better thought of as an intermediate marathon plan because it still involves high frequency running with higher mileage and regular interval training. The advanced plan is just the even higher mileage approach, which also introduces intensity sessions a bit earlier into the program. So I personally was already used to running 35 to 40 miles over 5 to 6 runs per week in the fall of last year when I decided to target the Mesa Marathon the following February. And I saw the Hanson's plan as a means of quickly building a solid foundation of running miles and good running habits, which will take me into the upcoming winter season. And now, as the book explains, both running plans are centered around what they call SOS workouts, or something of substance. Tuesday's SOS workout throughout the program involves efforts faster than your goal marathon pace. The first half of the plan focuses on building speed via 5K to 10K race pace efforts on the track for 9 weeks. Then in week 11 transitions to what they call strength runs, longer efforts totaling 6 miles at slightly faster than your goal marathon pace. An effort somewhat close to your half marathon race pace, or as I came to think of it, is pretty close to the upper end of how fast you are allowed to go in the marathon setting on race day without blowing up. Now, your SOS workout for Thursday, the plan calls tempo running, but the book clarifies that to be your goal marathon pace. Your Thursday workout, now and forever, will involve running one solo effort of 6 to 10 miles at precisely the running speed that you hope you'll able to maintain on race day. Now, we'll talk more about my thoughts on this later for sure, but one key difference between the advanced plan and the beginner plan is that the Thursday workout in the advanced plan starts considerably earlier in the year, and you accumulate nearly double the mileage at race pace in the advanced plan. The beginner plan involves a slower introduction into doing regular speed sessions each week, but comes with a big jump in volume of intensity from weeks 8 to 9. So if you are following the beginner plan, good luck with that jump. I'm guessing you get it right after a couple of tries with it. The long run is scheduled for Sunday on the plan, starting at 8 miles and building rather slowly and progressively to 16 miles over the first 10 weeks of the plan. Now, I've heard from other sources that suggest that a 10-mile or 16-kilometer long run, it might be the minimum viable dose required to get the full physiological benefits of this type of run session. And so it makes sense that for most of the program, we will hover right around that number. You also don't do any longer runs approaching 2 hours every single weekend, but on an alternating basis, with 1 week involving a dedicated long run of 2 hours or more, but paired with a standard easy midweek run of 6 to 8 miles, while the next week involves doing similar mileage in back-to-back kind of long runs, but neither run flirting with that 2-hour barrier being on your feet. So the remainder of every other training week is just around an hour a day of easy running 3 times per week. These runs include nothing of substance, just covering the distance at an easy pace. The plan starts with running 6-mile easy runs pretty commonly in the early part of the program. And then as the weekly mileage gets over the 50 miles per week range, you start to see more 7 and 8 mile long runs strung in there between several of your key SOS sessions. Now, totaling everything up, you can see that we end up with 3 weeks of 60 miles per week of running or more, including 2 quality sessions, each of which are both longer than 80 minutes, as well as a 2 to 2.5 hour long run in the final build-up weeks over the last 4 to 6 weeks of the program as it's written. I must admit, I did get a little creative with the plan structure at the end, but I think for the most part, yes, I did do a pretty good job of following the plan as it was written. I got a late start in actually accumulating 50 miles or more of running in a week due to the cycling training that I was doing for the L Tour de Tucson, which is held in November and overlapping with marathon training by about 1 full month. After the bike race, I averaged 55 miles per week in the 11-week stretch from mid-November into race day in mid-February. And as we can see here on the chart, I maxed out at just over 100 kilometers or 62 miles with a minimum weekly mileage of 52 miles during this stretch. With only 2 exceptions earlier in the season due to travel, I followed the plan and did every workout as prescribed, except arguably not finishing the last 2 marathon pace workouts. Regarding meaningful additions to the plan above and beyond what was literally written out in the program, I feel as that there are 3 that are actually worth discussing. The first is that of strength training. Now, as I mentioned in other videos that I've recorded, I got into regular strength training a couple of times per week in the summer months of 2023 before beginning any serious run training later on in the fall, and was able to maintain consistent gym work throughout the entire marathon block. Now, the book does cover strength training as a bonus chapter alongside commentary on things like nutrition and race day clothing selections. And considering most higher level run coaches will recommend staying consistent in the gym to increase your running performance, I do think that regular strength training helped with my durability and staying injury free later into the program. Something to think about if you find yourself breaking down due to the relentless high mileage of the Hanson plans. You need really strong legs and tendons to be able to absorb this daily pounding that you experience every day running on the road. Now, the second addition that I added to the plan came way later in the training block, in hand with some further reading that I was able to find along the way. Over the last month of training, from weeks 14 to 18, I began adding strides and pickups into my easier runs. Basically, a beginner version of converting those strength gains that you realize in the gym into a running power specific equivalent. Now, as I was nearing the end of marathon training and beginning to wear out from the cumulative training fatigue, they became less and less doable without adding more training stress to my program, but I tried to be cognizant of form and making sure to take lots of recovery in between my strides and pickups before actually starting the next one. It's hard to say how much it really helped with my running economy in a way that was usable for race day, but both strides and pickups are tools that I had planned to use a lot more so moving forward after the marathon came and went. And then the third true addition to the plan that I was willing to gamble with was the addition of marathon pace work into my long runs. Again, the book does technically address the concept in the appendices. However, having come across the idea in time to implement it into the later stages of my marathon program, I took the opportunity for all 4 of my 15 plus mile long runs to log some race experience component into each one. The 15-mile long run in week 9 fell on the same day as the local Tucson half marathon here in Tucson, Arizona. Now, with just a 2 or 3 mile pre-race warm-up, it was easy to run the 13-mile runs as an easy long run pace, but I was still able to add in some experience running on a point-to-point race on a net downhill course on asphalt, all of which would be pretty similar to training my legs as to what I would experience in Mesa in the middle miles from roughly mile 8 to 18. And it was also a good opportunity to practice taking on sports drink from aid stations rather than carrying my own bottle. It actually had been a long time since I tried to do that, and it's not super easy to do when you're running hard, but again, no marathon pace work involved with this particular run. And then for the 16-mile long runs, the longest that it gets as part of the Hanson Marathon plan, I turned each one of those into fast finish efforts by taking the first 10 miles or so easy, and then working in harder efforts in the last hour of those runs. The first one landed a few days before Christmas, and I was traveling without my sports watch. So pacing wasn't exactly ideal in that. It was just the process of getting in some kind of speed session. So after a 10-mile warm-up in that first run, it ended up with something like 3 by 1 mile at threshold running pace with a 1 mile easy recovery in the middle of that. 2 weeks later, I turned that into a more classical alternation run with 2 sets of half-mile effort, starting with 5 to 10 seconds faster than goal marathon pace, followed by a recovery of a half-mile effort at 10 to 15 seconds slower than marathon pace. And then in that final 16-mile day, that one actually happened to fall on the same day as a local 10K. And so similar idea, it was a 5-mile warm-up jog to get to the race site, and then the 10K itself, 6 by 1 mile over-under efforts, as well as a 5-mile cool-down jog to total 16 miles for the day. Now, I do think I might have overdone it a bit with that last workout, as I found myself struggling to keep up with things just a few days later. But I still think these additions were a net positive for me, especially psychologically going into race day. It's really important to have your body accustomed to marathon pace running efforts later into the runs. And for me, it did lead to a greater familiarity with running at goal marathon pace an entire spectrum of fatigued legs. To be honest, I felt quite good throughout most of the training plan. My body responded well and maintained the running volume for the first 15 weeks of a 17-week marathon plan. However, I did hit the wall in a big way after getting through the hardest single week of training found in week 15 and struggled with burnout and chronic fatigue over the last 2 weeks and began to really struggle with those last 3 harder run sessions before the taper. Psychologically, it was a really challenging time, but having felt good for the months before that, I had faith that the taper would leave me feeling good by race. And so, having said all of that, it does beg the question, is it actually a solid plan to prepare you for the demands of the marathon race day? Well, let's start first with what I liked about the program. Consistent high running volume of 50 plus miles per week. Now, I happen to do pretty well on the consistently high running volume that the plan forces you into. The scientific foundation, including the underrated benefits of easy running, as well as with maintaining high running frequency, made total sense to me. And because I didn't actually get injured by the program, staying consistent with it contributes to a hardness in your legs and makes it less likely you'll get injured the more consistently that you do stick to it. I like that it builds that resistance to fatigue into you, which I feel is so important for excelling in the marathon. I also like that it introduced regular speed work into the program, as any type of running intensity is often lost completely in many novice marathon running plans. As I didn't come from a track background, there was actually a decently steep learning curve trying to figure out how not to do the speed sessions too hard, but running fast on the track did make it easier to get through the longer strength effort. I also like that the Tuesday workout changed at the halfway point, transitioning from accumulating time near 5K pace to spending time at what they call strength pace. Strength pace itself became the upper end of those over-under workouts that I started adding to my long runs and helped me get a sense of what that pace level felt like that was just a little too hot for the marathon itself. Trying to hold that pace for just a mile or two and having it be really difficult was a constant reminder that I did not want to experience that level of discomfort on race day. Now, the long runs felt consistently challenging due to the principle of cumulative fatigue, and commonly stringing them in short duration with your twice weekly speed sessions made them feel consistently challenging, but they never left me unimaginably sore or beat up the next day, arguably with one exception. Again, there might be some survivorship bias going on here, but because I was always able to do the big run on Sunday workout as well as the easy Monday morning 6-mile run the next day, the overall approach did seem to pretty well simulate the mental and physical experience that you will go through in the last 10K of the marathon, but in a way that seemed a bit safer on the body and never requiring you to go too deep into a single training session. So on the whole, there is a lot to like about this plan as it is laid out, and it of course begs the question, what did I not like about the Hanson's Advanced Marathon program? Before I get into specifically all the aspects of the plan that I feel did not work out particularly well, I think this is also a good time to mention a book that I would like to recommend as a follow-up to the Hanson Marathon Method. After I had started training and started finding other resources here on YouTube, I ran across the book Run Elite by Andrew Snow, as well as his associated contents channel at Run Elite. Snow's book takes a more holistic approach in explaining the components of a well-designed running program, whereas the Hanson book is specifically written for marathon runners wanting to have a single good day over the marathon distance. Now, using the language found in Run Elite, Snow would call the first half of the Hanson's plan a 9-week block of support training, followed by a 7-week block of specific training, with no time at all spent at the foundational level of base training. You're expected to have shown up with a solidly built base at the beginning of the Hanson Marathon plan. I didn't have a very strong base going into the marathon plan, seeing the plan itself as the base training for other marathons that I might get into in the future. And so I didn't have the miles in my legs already and didn't have really all that much relevant strength work done prior to actually starting the running program. But my biggest criticism about the Hanson Marathon Method, using Run Elite as an improved framework, concerns the Thursday tempo run. Throughout his book is unapologetically against the approach of this sort of linear progression, making your tempo runs progressively harder by holding them for longer and longer periods of time every few weeks. At some point along the way, you're always going to run into issues with plateau or burnout or injury. And for this reason, he recommends training cycles of closer to 6 weeks before changing the type of stimulus you're subjected to on your harder run. Going into the marathon plan, I thought that it would be an advantage starting marathon pace runs earlier in the training block and being a bit more gradual with their build. And although the Thursday workout was never an easy one to accomplish, by week 7 or 8, I already felt like I had a pretty good familiarity with marathon pace efforts, despite being 2 months away from race day. And as I had mentioned earlier, I hit burnout in a pretty bad way beginning in week 16 and basically did not have another good hard run for the rest of the training program. Looking back on it, I don't think I really needed those last 5 tempo runs, and trying to do them fatigued just wore things down even further. Looking at it optimistically, I guess I could say I had a lot of practice hitting the wall and dealing with that mentally without completely stopping the marathon. And of course, this video review would not feel complete without pointing out that the volume included in the plan is an absolute bear. Now, I was able to get through every workout and keep up with the very usually 8 to 10, if not 11 or more miles, 6 days a week, for months on end. Now, that type of plan, you either survive it and become very, very strong, or burn out somewhere along the way and then have to meaningfully change your marathon race day strategy. Base training, strength work, and hills training are basically an afterthought. And although you probably do need to consistently be sleeping 7 to 8 hours every night of the week to not fall behind on your recovery windows, I have to say that despite commonly sleeping 9 hours or more almost every single evening, I still managed to get overwhelmed by the workload, albeit only for the last 2 weeks right before a planned recovery period. So I'm happy to report that after 18 weeks, or well, after 11 weeks of consistently doing the work, I was able to accomplish my goal time of 3 hours and 30 minutes. An 8-minute per mile pace felt like a stretch in the first few weeks of doing those tempo runs, but became increasingly doable as I got into better aerobic shape and became more comfortable doing those speed sets. And by the end of the training block, my fitness had caught up, and an 8-minute per mile pace was a very realistic time goal for me based on how several of those harder training sessions went later on in the block. My actual average average running pace over the 26.2 mile Mesa Marathon was 7 minutes and 56 seconds, beating my goal time by nearly 2 minutes. And despite having many nutritional issues during my longer and harder runs during the training block, on race day the nutritional plan worked out really well. My stomach still doesn't like goo gels, but after more than a month of rehearsal, my gut was at least used to them enough for all 5 to go down without any problems. And being mindful to follow a low fiber and low fat diet 24 hours before the start of the race left my stomach pleasantly empty, and I did not have to stop at a porta potty at all during the marathon. Crucially, I was able to exceed my time goal because I did not hit the wall. The dreaded wall in the marathon, usually occurring somewhere between mile 18 and 23, where your body becomes depleted of storage carbohydrate and all of a sudden you get smacked right in the face with the fact that it is way harder, bordering on impossible to continue the effort level. Now, I hit the wall more than a few times on some of those final tempo run workouts, and I guess I had already paid my dues to the marathon racing gods by that point because I was able to hold mental control over everything, even through mile 23 and into the finishing chute. I attributed that, of course, to the taper and being truly recovered for the first time in months, but also with being consistent with high running volume, high frequency, and consistent strength training. My legs were well conditioned to hold up to the pounding of 14 miles of downhill running, despite many people around me cramping or having to do the run, walk, shuffle after mile 22 or so. And so perhaps that's the highest praise that I can give to the program, and all you potentially really need to hear about it. I found the Hanson's Marathon plan to be a solid approach. I like the mixed approach of high volume with consistent speed work, and it left me feeling very well prepared for race day. The linear progression of many of the workout types does get stale, and the lack of any nuance regarding the non-running aspects of training is pretty par for the course when we're talking about these canned plans designed for public use. And as they go, this plan at least puts the entire rationale out there for you to understand and analyze for yourself. And the fact is, the plan worked. I felt ready, and that's all that you can really ask for out of a well-designed training plan. Race day was fun, and it was a great program to get me in pretty good shape, but I am perhaps even more relieved to see the plan end than I am happy about the outcome of the race. More than a month on since race day, and I'm finally getting back into running again, looking to build my base fitness and to try to potentially hit that Boston qualifier slot in the 2024 winter season. It would also be good for my long-term triathlon ambitions to learn how to figure out how to be a fit cyclist at the same time as getting the work done on the run side, until the summer hits anyway. And so if you do have the time and want to take your running fitness to the next level, check out the Hanson Marathon plan for yourself, and then maybe pick up Run Elite and start to check out Andrew Snow's channel. Even more ideas on how to build up your overall marathon capabilities. I hope you found my feedback and opinions helpful in making your decision, and if you do decide to check out one or both of the Hanson plans, leave me a comment down at the end of this video and let me know how it all worked out for you in your race. So I guess I better get laced up myself and knock this run out. It's going to be summer any second now. We'll see you on the next one.